Last 19 years in jail for the rape and murder of an 11-year-old babysitter. Frank Gimbel joining us this morning. Talk more about that and others. Barry Scheck, the Innocence Project, well known for anyone who's followed these stories, freeing men who've been behind bars 20, 30 years, DNA evidence, freeing them. This is one case, another in Texas, where they find evidence that's been sitting for years.
Absolutely. What is interesting about these cases as you look back on them, Sean, that is after these folks have had Project Innocent come in, revisit the trial files of the prosecutor, look at all the records associated with the case, and then what information has been developed since the time of the conviction, you often find situations where prosecutors have deep-sixed or not fully disclosed information that they the police developed during the investigation, that it was their obligation to give to the defense side during that phase of the case when the defense lawyers were preparing the case and during the course of the trial. Both of those things happened in the case in Illinois and in a similar case in Texas. Just this week in Texas, a man who had been in prison for 25 years was released, and it was found from DNA that it wasn't him. They identified the person whose DNA was on his wife's beaten body, and he is now charged with the offense. The allegations of Project Innocent now are that in these situations, Illinois, Texas, and other parts of the country, what needs to happen is there needs to be much better oversight on the responsibilities of prosecutors to turn over this kind of information, which the United States Supreme Court in 1963, in the case of Brady versus the United States, made a constitutional right of a person accused of crime to have the prosecutor turn over all information that might exculpate him or her from crime.
DNA evidence not new here of late with the Innocence Project. What's coming out of this, though? You say these prosecutors, I mean, is this something that's been going on, though, that we're finding for decades that wasn't uncovered, some evidence that they're burying?
Well, first of all, there's a combination of things, Sean. One thing is that DNA evidence is of recent vintage. Over the last 10 years, DNA has come into its own. The scientists have had an ability to essentially analyze someone's fingerprint internally and use a piece of hair, use a piece of fuzz, use something from a person's mouth to make like a fingerprint of that person. And that wasn't available 25 years ago in these two cases in Illinois and Texas. But now it is. So Project Innocent, where there is some kind of affirmative action to revisit the circumstances of the conviction of people, Project Innocent steps in and says, we'll see if we can establish your innocence. So they really go to the point of establishing innocence rather than the opposite of that, which often happens in trials, to show that there's a reasonable doubt about guilt.
And that's all you need, is that reasonable doubt.
Well, you need it, but of course a fact finder, a jury is going to decide whether there's reasonable doubt. And people looking at the same set of circumstances, Sean, can say, well, it's not all doubt. It's reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt in the eyes of some people are very strong, and in other people it's not. But DNA will continue to march along, and it will continue to show that you shouldn't kill people. There shouldn't be a death penalty, because there are people who are innocent that are in prison for capital offenses.
Frank Gimbel, thank you. Let's turn to Rob now.